was there are some cities, New York in particular, are providing incentives to converting under-occupied office buildings into apartments. What has been the occupancy rate of office buildings in Austin since COVID? And what are your thoughts and your reaction? So, Ashifa, why don't you take that one first?
Sure. Thank you, Joanne. Home has been something that's been really circulating through the city for quite a while, the last few months especially. And there's a lot of misinformation out there. State law states that local ordinances do not preempt HOA local governance and HOA restrictive covenants. I took the liberty of looking at Lakewood HOA's restrictive covenant, which does state that existing single-family lots cannot be changed or subdivided. So the short answer is that home is not going to affect this area. It is important that we know that your HOA still has autonomy and the ability to locally govern. Materially, we will not see a huge difference in this neighborhood, but the ordinance does allow for more flexibility in other areas of the city. It's also important that we know there has been no change to our heritage tree ordinance. So all of our protected trees in Austin are going to continue to be protected. And there has been no change in impervious cover limits for single family 2 and above zoned lots. So I am a strong believer that in some areas where we can have flexibility, we should, but in this area, we know that the culture of these neighbors and these residents would like to keep things the same, and local governance is important to allowing these residents to do so.
All right, well, so I'll address the latter part of the question first about office conversion. So we've looked at office conversion, and first of all, there's been a lot of vacancy during and post-COVID still. There's going to be a tremendous vacancy in office space downtown and other parts of Austin going to 2026 in all likelihood, and people are hoping that there's a recovery in that space, but I wonder about it because of remote work and other trends that are changing the landscape for how the real estate and particularly office space works in Austin and other places. We've also explored converting office to residential, and the challenge there is incredibly expensive. You would need city funds or some other subsidies to make that happen, because the challenge is when you look at it, you've got to basically just like we're talking about home and subdividing, you're talking about subdividing an office unit into dozens, if not hundreds, of individual units, which means individual AC, individual water, individual utilities. It's incredibly cost prohibitive unless you've got some kind of alternate resource in the form of the city or some other nonprofit or private-public partnership, whatever that looks like, to step in and help transition that process. So my guess is that's probably not going to be a realistic option for us. That we're probably going to wind up waiting until the economy rebounds and hopefully some of that space gets sublet into different places. But unfortunately, that's kind of where I see the office space right now. As far as home, I have a different perspective than Ashika. When I talk to the Infill Coalition, when I talk to architects, when I talk to the Michael Whalens and Richard Salls of the world, they say, well, we were really focusing on about 2,000 units that didn't have deed restrictions. That's where we really wanted our energy to be spent on home. Well, my question is, why did we upzone 176,000 single-family 1 through single-family 3 lots across the entire city? And the reality is, just because they want to focus on those lots that have no deed restrictions that are likely in Central and East Austin and not here, and even if your neighborhood is protected, it doesn't stop them from trying. And that's part of the reason that we fought to get notification to neighbors, to make sure that they were aware of what's going on in their neighborhood. It's part of the reason that you all may need to be prepared to go enforce your deed restrictions. And that's, by the way, not an inconsequential process. That's often a $100,000 to $200,000 process of lawyering up and fighting to make sure that something doesn't happen to you or your neighbors that may impact, having an eightplex in your backyard, or being able to see into your home, or whatever that is. It doesn't stop that from happening. And by the way, I have a different perspective than Ashika on this, because deed restrictions are a protection, but home does more than that. Home will change setbacks, right? And so changing setbacks means you can take down trees farther into your lawn. And that's already happening with some of the home redevelopments that are currently happening. So all those live live oak trees that we cherish, that are part of our tree canopy, that protect us from a heat island effect, they're already getting taken down. There are already stories of, currently, right now, people laying concrete for home redevelopments that are essentially poisoning or damaging the roots from the live oak trees that are on that property. They're gonna wind up killing them. So unless we're really vigilant, I mean, that's the name of the game with land use. You've got to be vigilant about protecting your lot. You've got to be vigilant about understanding your deed restrictions and knowing when you do need to enforce them. One thing that I would love, that I pitched to council 4 times during home, was can we do what Houston did? They have a part of their legal department that helps neighborhoods understand, inform, and enforce their HOA deed restrictions. And that would be a huge asset. I mean, the argument was very simple. If you're going to enact home on 176,000 lots, which is basically all of the SF1 through 3 lots in the entire city, then go ahead and make sure that people have some options. They at least understand what their rights are, and if need be, to help enforce them against what may be coming, because not everybody is above the board. There are some people in this town that are unscrupulous, and there are some people that will want to redevelop in your neighborhood. And when that happens, you need to be prepared. So my advice, and again, part of my frustration with the home process is we had lots of options on the table. There was a whole spectrum of negotiation happening between the 2,000 lots that, again, the Info Coalition did an MLS study for, and the 176,000 lots that we got. The fact that we are struggling to negotiate those things is, I think, part of the reason I'm running. It's part of the reason that council is broken right now. It's part of the reason that we need advocates on council that do understand the granularity of these issues to make sure that we can really represent homeowners, neighborhoods, and residents, so that when things do come and impact them, they're informed and ready.
You want to respond?
Sure. So just to clarify, I was talking about HOA restrictive covenants, not deed restrictions, which are 2 separate things. And HOA restrictive covenants are enforceable by an HOA, not by deed restrictions are enforceable by neighbors on each other, whereas an HOA restrictive covenant is something that the HOA would have autonomy over. It's also important to note that the home ordinance does include a very robust annual impact report in the ordinance. As the only person at this table that has actually worked in a governmental setting to craft policy, I know that policy is a living process, and I would be prepared to look at that annual impact report every year, think about what iterations need to be made to the policy, and think about what areas of District 10 we need to advocate for. I am not interested in misinformation, fear-mongering, or anything of the like. I'm interested in being future-focused and solutions-oriented. The only way out of our problems is to address them head-on, not to bury our head in the sand and act like they aren't happening.
Can I respond to that? Because I feel like there was some misinformation there. I just want to say, I spent 20 years in the political space. My first job was interning with State Representative Sherry Greenberg, where she was pensions investments, and we did a lot of policy work then. I worked with the State Democratic Party, I worked with the Texas Progress Council, I've ran numerous campaigns, I've consulted on numerous projects. I've been involved in political action committees that were focused on issues that involved policy and crafting policy. And frankly, one thing that the review that Ashika just mentioned was because I and the Austin Neighbor Council met with the mayor and pitched that idea to them. And my problem was that review didn't go far enough. We asked for not just a review of understanding how many homes were built, which is what that review is going to look at. We asked for what was going to be the impact on people's tax bills, what was going to be the impact on the environment and the heat canopy, and how many trees and heritage trees were going to come down. We asked for a whole number of things in that review process that are not currently specified in that review process. But that's the origin of that review process, was our meeting with the mayor and his staff about 8 months ago.
There has been no change to the heritage tree ordinance.
So, open it up. Question? Yeah.
There's a big difference. I'm not a home expert, but we are a PUD in Lakewood. We are exempted from all of the homes versus Jester, and Jester's not exempt for 2 reasons. One, it's not a PUD, and 2, it doesn't have a mandatory HOA. So I think that is amongst the people here, we have a diverging kind of interest here, because I feel pretty protected in Lakewood. But I would not feel, other than the economics, I don't think it's gonna happen in Jester, but those lots are big.
I agree. It's not really fiscally responsible for a developer to want to come in and develop any of those lots in Jester. I'm, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. The developers don't always have an investment in the community.
Right. I would, sure, agreed. They don't, and they don't live here, and they don't have the same stake in the community that we may have. A developer is unlikely to want to come in and develop a lot in Jester because of how valuable the land is. The hills in that area, and just the geographical landscape of the land and how valuable it is. That being said, I'm someone who believes very strongly in local control and local governance. So I think that it's important that HOAs have the ability to come together to create an HOA and to form a restrictive covenant in order to protect neighborhood interests. Like I said in my intro, I'm someone who I really consider myself to be a bridge builder, like not only between Old Austin and New Austin, but I would want to be someone who was able to both listen to neighbors and the rest of the city. And we know that we're not living in a vacuum. It is an ecosystem in the city, and so we have to think about what relationships we can work on. I think it's also one thing I want to really stress is that I have worked hard to build relationships with other members on the current council, with other members of our state delegation, and with other leaders in the city. We already have a super majority on council that's trying to push for a lot of growth and development. So if I were your next city council member, I would not be someone who was a lone voice on another side of an issue. I would be someone who was able to work with the current council to develop a compromise that's the most mutually agreeable solution for all people in the district and in the city, and actually deliver real results for D10 instead of just talking on the other side of an issue from the supermajority on council.
So I read the dynamics of council a little different, and I think home is an excellent example of that. We could not get a single amendment. That supermajority prevented a single amendment from helping craft something that could have been a much more broad-based solution. In fact, there was not a single amendment that was passed that in any way represented anything that the 8 supermajority members on council wanted. And I think that to me is a reflection of how broken that process is, because if anybody was at any of those council meetings, we had, gosh, 15,000 plus petitions, we had 700 plus people speaking in opposition, raising different concerns about everything from affordability. There's no affordability component, there was no equity overlay that was voted on. None of those things happened, including the one I just mentioned, which is how do we get actually real reporting about what's happening with this, not just now, but in the future, a year, 5 years from now. Not just the victory lap of how many homes get built, but what's the actual broad-based impact to communities? Are we taking down trees? What's the impact on our tree canopy and heat index and heat island effect? Home increases in permeable cover on lots with 3 units to up to 65%. That's going to change flood mitigation for neighborhoods. One of the reasons that Reed Park in the district is having challenges with sedimentation and why Watershed wanted to come in and take 60% of that parkland was because of that very issue. It's because we're redeveloping and we're adding permeable cover, and that's creating sedimentation and flood mitigation challenges for our communities. And if we're not careful about how we manage that, and if we don't have a balanced approach, and the key word there is balanced, if we don't have a balanced approach, then we are going to have to think about, we're going to have to defend our parks from Watershed. We're going to have to figure out alternate solutions for land use and redevelopment. There is a pathway forward. It's called the Imagine Austin Plan. We've had it since 2011 and revised it 2 times. It calls for node-based growth in the city. It calls for growth that's near transit corridors. It calls for growth that's near existing density. And we've got some of that already in District 10. We've got bus lines that run out to Tarrytown, to Far West, to Great Hills. And we've got places that are near Jollyville. We've got places that are near Wood Hollow. That's the place that we should be redeveloping, and that's part of the solution that I'd like to be part of, and working with the council to make sure that we can get affordable units built there, that we can get multifamilies built there. What I'm opposed to, and what really frustrated me with the discussion around home was dumping density in the middle of neighborhoods that don't have the infrastructure to support it, that aren't ready for flood mitigation issues, that aren't ready to lose their tree canopy, that have water and parking and sewage, and a whole host of other challenges, including even emergency vehicle access to get down there. And all of those things we asked council about during all 4 home public meetings, and we could not get answers from council about how they were gonna address those challenges. And so that's where a lot of my concern comes from, and why I feel like we need a better approach on council that is advocating for balance, that isn't just going along with 8 council members. I'm supported by a lot of council members that live in this district. Brewster McCracken, Laura Morrison, Bridget Shea, folks that are here, most of the precinct chairs, the Democratic precinct chairs that are here are behind me. And that's because they know the work I've done in this district, and they know I'll be a great advocate for this district. And they know that I'll be a balanced voice on council, pushing for the things that not just the rest of Austin needs, but also District 10 needs.
My opponent just said that impervious cover was raised to 65% for 3 lots, or 3 homes on a lot. That is not true. The impervious cover limit is at 65% for multifamily zoning, which is an existing limit that has already been in place. So there was no change to impervious cover for multifamily units. Impervious cover for 3 units on 1 lot was raised to 45% from 40 for single family 1 homes. Those are used at maybe a 5% rate in the city, and most of the homes in the city are single family 2 or single family 3, and there was no change to impervious cover to either of those. I'm not interested in getting into a he said, she said situation. I think I've made my point clear about wanting to listen to y'all and to the issues that you care about, and wanting to be a solutions-oriented member for council. I am also endorsed by several Democratic precinct chairs in the district and have many, many supporters in the district as well.
So, more questions? Sir?
Question, so my husband and 4th grader live in Jester. I currently serve on the LGBTQ commission and outgoing in that due to term limits. Question around how each of you will lead in our district and in our community around LGBTQ issues for our families like mine, for LGBTQ that are growing up, wondering if Austin, Texas is worth fighting for, staying in, etc. So just curious how you're going to lead in those issues.
Brandon, really important question. Thank you for asking that. Through my work at the state legislature, I've been at the forefront on issues related to gay rights, trans rights, and LGBT issues all over the board. Last session, we got into a very knockdown, drag-out fight with folks on the other side of the aisle about gender-affirming care for children and about other issues related to LGBTQ rights. I have shown my track record through my work at the state that that's an issue that I care about. I'm a frequent attender of Stonewall Democrats. I have leading members of the LGBTQ community like Gary Schumann who have supported me and are big advocates of mine, and I want to make sure that not only Austin, but West Austin is an inclusive and safe place for all kinds of families. As a former classroom teacher, I think it's really important that we build up our city around our families and our kids. And no matter what kind of family that looks like, we need to make sure that the city is ready to support them.
So I think one of the jewels of the city is that we've got such a diverse group of people who live here, including a substantial LGBTQ community. I'm not in that community, but I will say I'm an immigrant, I'm a Jew, I'm a cancer survivor, I've had a chronic illness for 30 years. There's all kinds of other groups that I do fall in and do really appreciate the different things our different community does bring to the table. I am also supported by folks in that community. It's absolutely a priority that's worth fighting for. We've got to make sure that they have all the protections and rights they need. I will say, just again, as a Jewish person, one of our challenges has been anti-Semitism and making sure that we've got a safe community for everybody, whether they're you know, gay or lesbian or Jewish or Muslim or whatever that is, looks like, has to be a priority. Hate crimes are on the rise in this town. And I'm not sure they're as discriminating about who they target as they ought to be. But making sure that, to me, part of it's a public safety issue. I know we talked about that issue earlier, but making sure that we've got the right response needed for when something happens is important, because I think that's the real way to send the message to a community that we're safe, is to make sure that when there is an issue, we swiftly respond to it, that we're able to turn the tide on hate crimes, and that people do feel like this is a welcoming community so that they can raise families regardless of their immigration, affiliation, whatever that looks like, and that, you know, that Austin continues to be known for a place of true diversity.
Before you announced your candidacy, how often did you go to city council or participate in your HOA?
Okay, well, I'm happy to start. So my first experience with council was in 2005 when I helped elect then Councilmember Betty Dunkerley. And so I got exposure to a lot of issues back then. Back then, if you guys recall, that was when the downtown condos were coming online. And so we went to a lot of different civic groups and HOAs and communities about what the implications of that would be. And that was a very valuable learning lesson for me for how council worked and the city worked, because, you know, the promise back then was, hey, if you just have these $250,000, if you let us build these downtown condos, we'll be able to provide these $250,000 beautiful units. If you're a firefighter and your wife is a teacher, you can have downtown living. Of course, that dream didn't materialize, the infrastructure around that didn't materialize, and that was a valuable experience for me for how council worked. I got re-engaged about a decade ago when I joined my HOA board, and our big issue at that time was the Austin Oaks PUD that was happening down the street at Squash Springs and Mopac. And the issue with that PUD that we had was we had a traffic impact analysis from the city that showed there'd be 50,000 trips per day on Squash Springs Road alone. And if you guys are familiar with that road, not only is there a firehouse right there that depends on being able to get around, that currently, right now, has to turn its sirens between 3 and 6 o'clock just to get onto Mopac to go serve people. But it's the only point of entry and egress for our community also. And we saw the city's plan, and the plan was, just like those condos that I mentioned a moment ago, the downtown living, they were gonna invest $4 million upgrading 2 intersections. And so we said, no, there's no way that's gonna work, we've gotta get involved. That's one reason I wound up helping Allison, was because we felt like she was gonna be a real proponent of making sure that we had real solutions to that problem, as opposed to the incumbent in that time. And so I got involved in that race, and really have gotten more and more involved since then. I've been on the Austin Neighborhood Council Executive Committee for the last 6 years. I've been involved on a lot of local issues, from homelessness to the convention center to making sure that we've got plans for public safety and drafting resolutions on those commissions. So the reality is, I've testified going back at the very least 8 years for the Austin Oaks PUD, but I testified 4 times on home because we thought there was a better pathway forward, and we couldn't get even, council was mostly on their phone. A lot of those council members were just in their phones, not even paying attention to our feedback, and that was incredibly frustrating. To me, that's reflective of where the city is right now. That if you're not in the, if you're not on the inside circle, you're out. And that was certainly our experience at council over the last year. I think it's been systematized, frankly. It's one of the reasons I'm running, is because we've seen council go from 3 minutes, public testimony going from 3 minutes per agenda item to 2 minutes per agenda item to 2 minutes for the whole agenda. You used to be able to go back in the day and talk to your council member at City Hall. You used to be able to go, now there's, a security gateway, and you've got to go, chase them down the bathroom or something to bend their ear. It's just not a great process for public engagement, and I know we can do better. And so the answer is, I've been involved a lot. I've been involved in the board for 10 years. I've been involved with city issues for at least 8 years. And if you want to go back to 2005, then for 19 years.
Thank you, Joanne. I have been very involved with a lot of different issues in the city and of the state. The fact of the matter is that my opponent is older than me and has had more life experience as an adult and more time to do things than I have. But like I mentioned earlier, every minute of my adult life has been spent in service of my community. My opponent just mentioned how if you were a teacher and if you were a firefighter and your wife was a teacher, you could build your life here. I was a teacher. My ex-husband was a firefighter. We were that couple. I have the lived experience to try to build Austin into a place where families like that can live. I have had real working class jobs in this city to try to build my life here. My opponent also likes to mention the Austin Oaks PUD quite a lot. A PUD is a planned use development. And PUDs often create opportunities for redeveloping a certain site in order to provide more community benefit through that redevelopment. The Austin Oaks office complex is a large, sprawling, low-slung office complex that's very unoccupied right now with a ton of impervious cover through a ton of surface parking. If we had been able to have that PUD happen and get that redeveloped, that PUD would have incentivized community parks, urban trails, and things that would have actually benefited the community. My opponent is proud of opposing that project because he cared more about the traffic in his neighborhood than community benefit in people's lives. I also know through my work at the Capitol that constituent services are key. My boss is a representative up in Williamson County, and he has shown me time and again how important making our constituents feel heard, how important that is to the success of our district. We have a reputation in Williamson County as being an office that even if my boss isn't your representative, you should call our office and we will get your issue sorted. We will call the Workforce Commission, we will call HHSC, and we will get your issue sorted out. I plan to bring that same spirit and hard work and tenacity to City Hall. My opponent talked about how he cares about homelessness. He has said vocally on his website that he wants to reduce spending on homeless services. This is a personal issue for me. When I was in the classroom, we were the homeschool for the Salvation Army Homeless Shelter. And I had anywhere from 5 to 10 students that were in and out of unhoused situations. We know that there is a dark side to homelessness that makes us feel unsafe and scared sometimes, but these are also human lives that we're dealing with. And so we have to think about smart spending on our homeless services, not simply reduction in spending. Lastly, it's concerning to me how much my opponent really likes to demonize the current council. That's not how you get things done. That's not good policy making. I really believe that we need to work collaboratively with the current council. The rest of Austin has moved in a direction, and we can't have one person moving the other direction, taking us backwards, if we want to actually get things done for District 10. I'm someone that is willing to make solutions and make compromises and deliver for this district.
So, things that you, I hope that you can, help me thank these two candidates for coming with us today. And Kelly, answering your question.